Hello, stranger. It's me, Madame Strangeways, back with two new true strange stories for you. First, an impossible sound in the middle of the night, followed by lucid dreams and a timely apparition. And, as always, solicited or not, usually not, I share my insights and observations after each spooky tale. Now, it's time to dim the lights and get cozy while I read you these true strange stories here on Madame Strangeways. Mama by Competitive Bad 5295. My husband of 25 years and I were laying in bed one night in the 2-story house he owned a few years prior to our marriage. It was after midnight and the streets were barren, not uncommon for the area. A quiet neighborhood, no dramatic neighbors. As I lay there, I heard a disembodied child's voice, a soft voice, like a little girl would have, say, "Mama?" I laid there for only a minute when my husband and I simultaneously rolled over and faced each other. He said, "Did you just hear that?" I asked him, "What did you hear?" For validation, I wasn't losing my mind, and curiosity, I guess. I regretted asking him, to be honest. He said, "I heard a little girl say, 'Mama.'" We wouldn't have thought much about this, for I have a beautiful daughter who's now 26 from a previous but short marriage. But it couldn't possibly have been her, because she was with her dad over an hour away. We moved 3 years later. It is worth mentioning that in the 3 years we were in that house, we fought like madmen. I can chalk it up to newlywed arguments or whatever, but it got ugly. No physical violence, thankfully, but we had some dark days. I could never get warm in that house. The air felt heavy and cold. The house still stands and the owners have given it a complete makeover. I wonder if they have experienced anything unusual. If you've made it this far, thanks. I'm definitely not an English major and my sentence structure could use a makeover too. First of all, the writing was great. The sentence structure, also great. You do not need to be an English major or a best-selling author to write and share your story. So for anyone listening that maybe wants to share their story, wants to write their story, and they're thinking, "I'm not an English major, my sentence structure needs major reworking," share it with me anyway. Share it with me anyway. Share it with us. Don't hold it back just because you are not a best-selling author. In fact, I have read some best-selling authors that are not very good at writing. So, just give it to me. Don't let it hold you back. Secondly, competitive edge. I'm going to call you comp. What did I just read? Why? We all know, I think we can all agree universally, kid entities, child ghosts are the worst. They're the scariest, top tier. I mean, whether you're talking about Ju-on, The Grudge with that kid with the creepy open mouth, so scary. And then I think Ringu. I think Sadako, or Samara in Ring. I think she's technically a kid, also scary. Exorcist, for real this time. Exorcist, very scary. Even, you know what? Even The Shining, even though, oh, why am I, Danny, right? Danny, that's the kid's name. Even though Danny has The Shining, and he's not a bad guy, he's still scary. He's still scary. And it's just because he's a kid. Kids are scary. Kids are inherently scary. I'm sorry out there. If you like kids, you still have to admit that kids are scary and that there's something that is inherently scarier about kids than adults in horror movies. And then y'all are just minding your business, the kids away. You'll have the house to yourselves. And then you hear a tiny voice say, "Mama?" Like, no, that sounds terrible. I don't want it. And you both heard it. Because if you've listened to any more of my episodes, you may have heard me wax poetic about hypnagogic or hypnopompic hallucinations, which can be auditory hallucinations, where you hear something that's not really there as you're falling asleep or waking up. That's not what this is. Because your husband heard the same thing. And it was smart of you to ask, what did you hear? It was smart of you to ask him what he heard, instead of you saying, did you just hear a little girl say, "Mama"? You were able to say, what did you hear? And then he was able to say, I heard a little girl saying "Mama," and you had already heard that exact same thing. So as opposed to you putting that seed, you planting that seed in his mind where he could go, oh, well, yeah, I guess that is what I heard. No, you both heard it. So it's not a hallucination unless it's a shared hallucination, which is a thing. It's called folie à deux, and do not come for me. I did my best. I am not French, but it is French for madness of two. And it's a thing. You can have shared hallucinations. However, I don't think that's what was happening here, which then begs the question, what did you guys hear? What did you hear? In my head, I'm going, okay. Was there like a toy, like a baby doll toy? Do kids' toys do this anymore? Where you like they talk and they go, "Mama," you like move it and the eyes open and close and "Mama." Isn't that's a thing? So like, I guess this was a while ago. This was probably 20 years ago at least, right? If she's 26 now. Did she have a baby doll like that made that noise? And that's what y'all heard from the other room? Maybe that's what I'm hoping. Fingers crossed that that's what's happening. But that also doesn't explain kind of the other phenomena that you experienced in the house. I know you do hear a lot in the paranormal community where if there's a bad vibe in a house and there's just something wrong with it, obviously associated with ghosts, you've got temperature drops where you were saying you can't get warm, and then y'all were fighting a lot. You do hear a lot about negative energy, and that impacts people's relationships. I mean, the biggest case that comes to my mind right away is the Amityville Horror House, which is a whole nother conversation that I want to have with y'all. I want to talk about the Amityville Horror House. I want to talk about Ed and Lorraine Warren and the questionable stuff that came out of that. But, it's permanently set in the culture. It's permanently set in American culture and the horror culture that the Amityville Horror House actually did have ghosts or demons or both. And that is why Ronald DeFeo Jr. killed his whole family, and not because he was a psychopath. He was innocent. It was demons and ghosts. Anyway, please let me know. You know what? I want to hear from you. If you want to hear more about the Amityville situation, I would love to do a deep dive on it. But all to say, people associate bad energies and, colder houses and spiritual activity, especially bad negative spiritual activity, with changes in personalities. which it sounds like what y'all were both experiencing, that this was uncharacteristic of the rest of your relationship together. But while you were in the mama house, you were fighting like hellcats and hellhounds. So really glad that you moved out. Glad things got better for you. I'm also glad that you've never heard that. You've never heard a little girl's disembodied voice in your ear ever again. And I hope that it never happens ever again to you or to anyone listening. That's my gift to you. And I know it's been a long time since this story happened, but I would be so interested to hear the history of the house or people that have lived there previous to you. Did they also have trouble getting warm? Did they also hear voices? Were they also maybe arguing and in bad moods and bad tempers because of some vibe in the house? Was there a little girl that actually lived there? Was she looking for her mom? Did she die there? Did they all die there? So many unanswered questions that I think are just going to have to stay unanswered, unfortunately. But wow, what a spooky story. The First Encounters by Ted. I've had a fairly normal childhood, growing up in Vietnam, emigrating to the US when I was around 13. Everything was typical until my senior year in high school. I had just gotten back from wrestling practice and I was exhausted, so I dozed off to sleep. I usually had the radio alarm clock on next to me, so I fell asleep listening to music on the radio. I woke up suddenly, not knowing where I was. In my dazed state of mind, with my eyes still closed, I heard the song This Love by Maroon 5 coming from the radio. I remembered that I left the radio on when I went to sleep and realized that I was in my bed. I opened my eyes, and I could no longer hear the song. I was staring at the ceiling, and I was unable to move. If you've listened to many paranormal stories, you know that this was sleep paralysis. However, in 2007, this phenomenon was not very well known. Back to my motionless self. I was scared because I thought I was paralyzed. I yelled out, "Ma, Ma," for my mom, but I could only hear the sound in my head because my mouth wouldn't open. Exhausted, I closed my eyes for a moment and I heard, "This love has taken its toll on me. She said goodbye too many times before." I opened my eyes to look at the ceiling again and I couldn't hear the song anymore. I tried to move my body but couldn't. After what seemed like a half hour of struggling, I felt my legs and arms moving. I was sleeping on the edge of the bed and the thought of turning over to fall onto the floor, waking me up, was in my mind. I turned my body over, off the bed. I felt the sensation of falling, felt the shock of the thud as my back seemed to hit the floor. Then, silence. I opened my eyes and I was staring at the same part of the ceiling. I did not move. My body betrayed me and gave me the stimuli of falling without actually doing so. I tried again, and the same thing happened. I was stuck in a waking nightmare. After a few times, I finally woke up. I sat right up, my forehead and shirt damped with sweat. My heart was racing, and that was the first time I truly felt afraid. Things started to go wrong after that afternoon. One night, I had my first vivid or lucid dream. I was at home, but nobody else was there. The layout in the apartment that I lived in at the time was the same, but the furniture was different, older, dustier. I walked to the hallway across from my bedroom. There was a fallen mirror with a diagonal crack on it. I walked in front of it and saw the reflection of a Caucasian little boy with bowl-cut blonde hair and blue eyes. I said to myself, this isn't real. I must be dreaming. Then I woke up. That was the first time I had a vivid dream, and it scared me tremendously. The next time I had a similar vivid dream, I was floating around the apartment. The furniture was also different from reality and from the previous lucid dream. I floated through the layout and through the sliding door in the kitchen into the backyard. I immediately came face to face with a darker-skinned Hispanic or Native American man. He didn't look scary or intimidating, but he said, "What are you doing in my house?" in a confused but loud voice. I woke up sweating, heart beating fast. What did it mean, I wonder? Was this his house? Did he used to live here? I didn't try to answer those questions and just went back to sleep and brushed it out of my mind. A few weeks went by without another incident. I was taking a shower, as usual. Suddenly, I felt someone watching me. I cleared off the shampoo from my face and looked out. Someone was in the bathroom, looking at me. I couldn't see clearly through the frosted bathtub door. It was a male figure in a light blue button-down shirt and tan slacks pulled up high past his belly, and a green hard hat like one of those hats people wear in the jungle. I slid the frosted door open, and there was no one there. I didn't even finish showering, just dried off and got out of there. I chalked it up to my imagination. That night, my dad told me that my grandpa, his dad, passed away in Vietnam. We turned on Yahoo Messenger, yes, I am that old, and saw part of the funeral procession on webcam. A few weeks later, we received a DVD from Vietnam. It was common to videotape the funeral and send it to loved ones, especially if they could not be there in person. There was a slideshow of my grandpa from when he was young to his last photo taken. I paused the DVD when I saw it. My grandpa, in his youth volunteer uniform, wearing a light blue button-down shirt, tan slacks, and a green, wide-brimmed hard hat. I counted the time of his passing, and it was a few minutes before he appeared in the bathroom. I didn't tell my parents any of this because they believed that we were Catholic and that God protected this house, and there couldn't possibly be anything paranormal happening in God's house. If there were, it would invalidate their religious beliefs, and they wouldn't have that. I did not process what happened to me and what I saw until much later, when I confronted my own sensitivities with the supernatural. Meanwhile, I pushed it back down into the depths of my memories and carried on. Ted, thank you so much for submitting this story. Now, Ted has also submitted a handful of other stories to me, which was amazing. So, Ted, you're the GOAT. I appreciate you so much. There's a lot to unpack here, so I'm going to need you to buckle up. We start with some lucid dreaming. We start with some sleep paralysis. We start with some false awakenings, all sleep related, but all creepy as well. And, may or may not be the precursor to what happens after that with seeing your grandfather, an apparition of him before you even know he's dead. So there's so much to unpack. We're just going to jump in. So we've got sleep paralysis, which you mentioned, I would say in 2007, it wasn't super common to be talked about. Growing up, I had been told stories about how my uncle had it happen to him. My grandmother would tell the story, my mom would tell the story, and they, of course, phrased it as it was a demon. He woke up and there was a demon sitting on his chest, and that terrified me. So when I learned that sleep paralysis was a thing, that gave me a lot of comfort. But when it's happening to you and you don't know that sleep paralysis exists, it's terrifying. I did recently learn, please everyone try this, PSA. If you are experiencing sleep paralysis and you can access your memory enough to think straight, apparently something you can do to help get out of a sleep paralysis episode is by focusing on one part of your body, like a finger or a toe. If you're Uma Thurman, for instance, maybe a toe. Well, specifically, if you're a Quentin Tarantino directed Uma Thurman, you're definitely going to choose the toe. So you choose one part of your body like a finger or a toe, and you focus all of your effort on wiggling it. Apparently that is supposed to help pull you out of the episode. So if you try it and it works, I want to hear about it. If you try it and it doesn't work, I don't need to hear about it. You don't need to say anything. You just chalk it up to experience. Ted, you also experienced some false awakenings where you think you have woken up, but actually you're still in the dream. And those are actually associated with lucid dreaming, which makes sense because you were having a lot of lucid dreams. Now, lucid dreaming is where you are aware that you are dreaming, but there's different layers. There's different levels of lucid dreaming. So the fact that you realized at one point in the dream, I'm dreaming, shifted that from one level to a deeper level of lucid dreaming. But lucid dreaming also involves very realistic settings that you remember with perfect clarity when you wake up. Lucid dreaming apparently is a learnable skill. So you can do that by what they call increasing your dream recall. So what you want to do is write your dreams down in a dream journal as soon as you wake up and make a habit of that. It takes time. You need to also be checking in with yourself throughout the day with reality checks, either like in the show Evil, which is really good, by the way. Highly recommend if you haven't seen it. Michael Emerson, just chef's kiss. He's fantastic in that show. But one of the characters is doing that a lot to lucid dream. I think she uses a tie around her wrist, and she looks down at it and decides, oh, okay, if this is here, I'm awake. I'm not dreaming. Anyway, and I do want to also make a call out that if anyone that's listening has issues with dissociation or dissociation disorders where you're dissociating from reality, definitely avoid dabbling in lucid dreams, because even if you don't have a history of dissociation, dissociating, or derealization, it can make it really difficult to determine reality from the dream world. So be careful there. Also, talking about lucid dreaming, did you know in Tibetan Buddhism, there is such a thing as dream yoga? So you become lucid and then you train yourself in the lucid dream not to have any fear, basically. There's a lot more to it. I don't know. I will say, of all the yogas, I think I would probably be best at either sleep yoga or goat yoga. I think I'd be good at either of those. So who were you seeing in your dream, in your lucid dreams? You saw the reflection of yourself wherein you were like a white kid with blonde hair. Was that a kid that lived there before? And then the guy in the backyard who acted like, what are you doing in my backyard? Wow, did he live there before? I think that's a great question, and I wish we could ever know the answer. So your grandpa, that is so eerie. It's eerie that you felt someone watching you before you saw the figure of your grandfather. It's not the other way around. It's not like you think you saw something. You even had to rinse shampoo out of your eyes. So you're clearly not able to look around. So you feel someone looking at you, which is not a good feeling to have in the shower. That is the worst, most vulnerable place that you can feel like someone's watching you. Which also, Grandpa, get out of the bathroom. I'm taking a shower. I don't need you here in the bathroom with me. You couldn't wait. This couldn't wait another few minutes for me to at least not be naked. Not great timing. And then to see it through the shower glass, that figure of him wearing that distinctive uniform, it's possible that you had seen that photo of him in that uniform before. It's possible that maybe he had some health complications or issues that you heard your parents discussing. They may have even brought it up to you at some point. You just didn't remember, didn't think about it. And so maybe you had your grandpa on the mind. But even if that's the case, even if it's just a coincidence, even if you had been primed to think about the death of your grandfather, even if all of that happened, the fact that you saw him around the time of his death, I don't have a way to explain that. I don't know how you do explain that. There's coincidences, and then there's that. It does seem more substantial and compelling than just chalking it up to a coincidence. Now, when someone is at the end of their life, it is incredibly common that for up to 2 weeks before their death, they can have visions of their loved ones visiting them who have passed on before them. It's called transitioning, where the dead meet the dying. It's supposed to give the person who's at the end of their life some comfort and to maybe not be so scared of what's happening and what's going to happen to them, which would make perfect sense if you were the one who was at the end of your life and you saw his specter and he had already passed away. But that's not what happened here. You're still alive and you didn't even know he was dead. So when we're talking about people knowing, feeling that their loved ones have passed before they actually find out that they've passed, that is getting into the realm of what's called parapsychology. So parapsychology is, in a nutshell, the study of psychic phenomena by actual scientists and scholars. It was started in the 1930s by Joseph Banks Rhine. I'm saying his name and realizing I have not checked to see if he is a Nazi or an anti-Semite, which both things happen a lot when you're looking into the occult, especially around that time period, especially when you're talking about blending science and the occult. So, you know what? Let me just take a moment really quick. I'm just going to pause and we're just going to Google it. Good news, everyone. He's not a Nazi, or at least not so far as I could find. So when we're talking about parapsychology, that does include things like what we heard in this story. Generally, this sort of phenomena is specifically anecdotal based, because how do you measure it? How do you quantify it? How do you apply the scientific theory to it? It's difficult. However, there are some extremely compelling stories, just like the one that you shared with us, Ted. So listen, take this case of Dr. Bernard Beitman in his article on Psychology Today. He says, late in the evening of February 26, 1973, when I was 31 years old, I found myself bent over the kitchen sink in an old Victorian house in San Francisco, choking on something that was caught in my throat. But there was nothing to cough up, as I hadn't eaten anything. I choked for a very long time before I could swallow and breathe normally again. The next day, my birthday, my brother called me to tell me that our father, 3,000 miles and 3 time zones away, had passed away in Wilmington, Delaware, just as I was choking in California. My father had bled into his throat and choked on his own blood. The timing led me to think it couldn't possibly have been random. Now, Dr. Beitman studies coincidences. He studies this. I think he even coined a term called simulpathy, that to explain when loved ones or, closely bonded pairs, so husbands and wives, or parents and children, or sisters and brothers, especially twins, when they sense something, when they have an empathetic reaction, either to a death or to an injury, anything like that. That's what he's coined that term. So he studies coincidences. But now that we're talking about coincidences, that also leads us into synchronicities. Synchronicities, related to coincidences, except it has a sort of it has a vibe like it's fate. It's the universe telling you something. I do want to say that looking for synchronicities is a slippery slope because our brains are pattern seeking machines. It is all our brains want to do. And so then when we give our brain the task, hey, go find me a bunch of coincidences that I would not have normally noticed, but now I need you to be constantly hypervigilant on the search for coincidences. Of course, they're going to misinterpret something in order to make it fit the pattern that it's trying to finish. It's going to find synchronicities. If you ask your brain to find them, it's going to find them. It's going to be very good at finding them. And then before you know it, you're going to go full Charlie Kelly mode, like Pepe Sylvia. And you're going to have a board. There's going to be red string everywhere. And let me just tell you, it's not fun. It's not fun. I've been there. I've done that. I cannot recommend it. But what I can recommend is to be skeptical about coincidences. And it's important to remember that correlation is not causation. However, Ted, was it really just a coincidence that you happened to see the figure of your grandfather at almost exactly the time of his death? Was that just a coincidence? We may never know. Thank you so much for listening. Remember, you can feel afraid and not be in danger. Please remember to like and subscribe. It means a lot. Until next time.